Most people live their whole life as a passive recipient of it. Life just happening to them, right? They don't realize that you're actually the cause of your own reality. In this video, this is a clip of one of my coaching calls where I break down self-agency. Self-agency is when you realize that you're actually the active cause of your own life rather than just being a recipient and life happening to you. When you realize this, you're going to give yourself so much more power and control over the results you get. Imagine your whole life you've been going through your life thinking the things that happen around you aren't due to you and who you're being. In this video, I will break down self-agency using Hermetic principles, the law of cause and effect, just like gravity. The law doesn't care if you believe in it or not, it governs the world we live in. I also break down why you might feel insecure in walking into a room full of strangers, networking events, but as soon as you realize and understand the concepts that I'm teaching in this video, your confidence or lack of is going to either increase or completely go away. Today's call, what we're going to speak about today is self-agency. Self-agency is the moment you recognize, right, that you're the active cause of your own life. You are not the passive recipient to it, okay? When you have self-agency, it's when you recognize that you're the active cause of your own life. And I'm going to apply this to the law of cause and effect. Ultimately, most people live life as the passive recipient of their life. So life happens to them instead of life happening for them, and instead of them actually creating their life, right? So most people, they operate as the passive recipient of their life, okay? And this means that life will happen to you if this is you, okay? But if you are the active cause of your life, then ultimately you are the one that creates. Okay, you create. And ultimately I want to tie this to a Hermetic principle, which is a law that governs this universe that we live in, right? And it's the law of cause and effect. We spoke about it on last week's call. But again, it's a very good law to look at. And if you've not heard of the law of cause and effect before, I'm going to simply explain what it is in a very easy way so you can understand. Right? The law of cause and effect states that every cause creates an effect, and every effect is created by a cause. And ultimately, when you have self-agency and you recognize that you are the active cause of your own life, not the passive recipient of it, then ultimately you realize that you're the cause and life is the effect. So who you're being and the reality you then experience is not random in any way. And the perspective that I've reinforced, especially being over in, well, actually, it's just happened over in Marbella recently, right? And the perspective that I've had, or reinforced at least, because I've always kind of had it, right, is that if you in any way feel insecure, if you feel like people are judging you and you don't feel confident, that is, of course, your ego creating the illusion of fear, right? But I want you to really take on this perspective. Hopefully this will help you. And actually, let me ask you, put a Y in the chat box if you have walked into a room, a new place, there's strangers, or it's a business meeting, or it's new people, it's a networking event, and you've not felt fully confident. Put a Y in the chat box if you've ever felt like that. So after this call, I can almost guarantee if you take this perspective on, the intensity of how insecure you feel is going to at least half. And ultimately, it's going to be because you're taking on the exact lens that I'm giving you right now. So I want you to think, in your life, you are the one that gives everything a label, right? We spoke about this last week, but ultimately, life is neutral. You label it, okay? And in brackets, that would obviously be give it meaning. Right, so this here, life, includes everything that's in it. So the people that are in those rooms, okay, maybe the event itself, okay, even again, the way people look at you, you give everything a label. So ultimately, if you walk into a room and you see strangers, new people at a networking event, whatever it may be, if you have this lens of you choose what they mean to you, Ultimately, in your life, you're the only one that can give labels and meanings that apply to how you react and how you feel. You're in complete control of the meaning you give life. So when you're walking into a room and maybe full of strangers, maybe it's a networking event, ultimately, the only reason you would feel insecure, negative, and not fully confident in being yourself is because of the labels you're giving things. But the moment you go, fuck's sake, like I'm actually in complete control of the labels that I tie to life. I walk around here and every single person that I can see in my set, every single person is in my world. They're in your reality. You're not in their reality. You give meaning to everything around you, right? And for me personally, when I took on that perspective and I started to apply it, things got a lot easier when it came to being in public. I didn't feel as anxious, overwhelmed, didn't have the fear of being seen, because ultimately everyone around me was just whatever I gave the meaning to them, right? They became a part of my world and my reality, rather than me being controlled by maybe them labeling me. I realized that if I look at them and however they react, however they look at me, maybe they even say something, I get to choose what they said and what that means. I get to choose what the way they looked at me and what that means. So therefore, if I feel negative, I'm giving it a negative meaning. But when I'm now in public places or I'm at a new event, I'm standing as someone with self-agency, as someone that's an active cause of my reality. So if I don't want to feel negative, I know that I can choose what meaning I give to what is around me, and therefore, ultimately, the label that you give, okay, and you can think of this as meaning, is going to dictate how you feel. You're then going to make a decision. That decision will be to behave in a certain way, take a certain action, and then ultimately the outcomes in your life will be driven by how you behave. And self-agency is recognizing that you're the active cause and you can choose this part. But I want you guys to practice this. The next time you're in public, even again, it sounds a bit crazy. It might sound a bit crazy. But even when you're in your own house with the people that live with you, right? You choose what they mean to you, right? Because a lot of people, they get triggered by the people around them. The closest ones usually are the ones that create the most stress in your life, right? Funnily enough. And ultimately, when that happens, it's because of the meaning you're giving them. They're in your reality. You're not in theirs. And to them, you're in their reality. As long as we have self-agency, as long as this actually is something that we live by. So, I want to speak, and this is, again, last week mentioned this briefly, but ultimately I want to speak about something called Hebb's Law. And I want this to be something that you understand deeply, that this is not just a random concept. This is actually neuroscience. This is how it works. So neurons that fire together, right, wire together. Neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So even giving you the example of you walking into a place, and instead of giving things automatic meanings or feeding the emotions and or the thoughts that pop up of the meanings that things have around you, because very likely they're going to be unconscious. We unconsciously perceive reality, and a lot of the time you're going to walk into, maybe it's a social setting, again, could be a business meeting, could be a client call, could be even shooting content, whatever it is. But in the moment that you're in the present moment, you're unconsciously going to give things labels and meanings, right? Because all our brain can do is predict what it knows. So whatever happened before in your life, you're going to perceive reality, interpret it unconsciously in a certain way. We cannot control the first thought that pops into our head, but we can control the second. So I want you to practice this. I want you to practice the concept or the perspective that I gave you of just being in the moment and noticing that you can choose to give meaning to whatever's around you. The people, the place, whatever it is in front of you, you get to give that meaning. And the more you practice this, and the less that you feed that unconscious label that you're going to give things, which is likely negative, it makes you feel insecure, not confident. Instead of feeding that unconscious perception that's created, that first thought, you're going to start feeding the thought of, I have self-agency. I get to label what this thing is. And ultimately, the pattern that you have of unconsciously and emotionally reacting, I want you to think as an analogy. It's not how it looks in your brain, right? But just as an analogy, if you've been like that for years, if you're experiencing life, it's just not even just places. If you're experiencing life through the lens of life happening to you, and you've got a bit of a victim mindset, which we all do at some point in our life, right? Because I wouldn't say babies have self-agency, right? So if you're not trained to have self-agency by your parents, you'll likely not have it as an adult. And you'll very likely have to do calls like this and find out what self-agency is and actually step into the version of yourself that has self-agency, right? So for so many years in your life, you've very likely got patterns that look like this, right? They're very strong. You've reacted quite a lot, and ultimately you've just got used to life happening to you instead of for you, right? But ultimately what we can do, the moment we snap out of that and we realize that we've got self-agency, we can create a new pathway, okay? And this new pathway might start off looking like this. But the more we choose the new pathway, okay, the new thought, the new emotion, right? Think about this. So this label that we give it might happen unconsciously. It leads to this emotion. As soon as it gets to this emotion part, ultimately we've already, once this meaning pops in, it's likely going to pop in and you're going to experience it as a thought. Okay, the first thought we cannot control. We can't control this one, right? But we can control the second one. And it's usually the second, third, fourth, many thoughts after the first that lead to this strong emotion that we have. This emotion, this emotional charge, is what creates a stronger pathway, right? Because you can have negative thoughts, but if there's no strong emotion charging those thoughts, they don't create much, right? Whereas if we have strong negative emotions because we're constantly reacting to life and we don't have self-agency, these pathways will look like this. But the more we feel good and confident and feel relief in that security that we can give meaning to things and we're not a victim, there's going to be a new pathway that's formed. This new strong pathway of having self-agency. And there's another thing called synaptic pruning. And synaptic pruning is a process where your brain will start to prune off pathways that you don't use. And ultimately, if you use this as an analogy and as a visual, the less you react unconsciously to life, the pathways that were created when you were doing that start to become weaker. They start to lose power, right? And they start to become pathways that aren't used, at least automatically. And you're going to then, after a period of time, because this requires either repetition or a very strong positive emotional charge, which you can create with the state anchor tracks that you guys have got access to, this will take a little while, wrong color, but this will take a little while to build up, okay? But eventually, what will happen is, this will become your new subconscious baseline. And the cool thing is, you guys all have access to hypnosis and the ability to work with me and someone that can help you rewire these pathways in a much shorter space of time, right? But I want to really make this clear. Imagine you have a pathway and this is a negative pathway. Well, ultimately, what created this pathway? What created this pathway was an experience that had intense negative emotion attached to it. And what we can do using hypnosis, and I actually done it with a client today, is we can remove, in fact, let me rewind, make it better for you guys. So you have an experience with an intense negative emotion, right? And then what happens is this is stored, okay, in your subconscious mind and your nervous system. Think of it like this. And ultimately, what hypnosis can do, okay, hypnosis can remove that stored emotion from your nervous system. Okay, and when you remove it, what is no longer there is emotional resonance. If you've had pathways and if you've experienced life for the most part unconsciously and with no real self-agency, you're very likely going to operate from a place of life happening to you. But the moment you recognize that you have self-agency and you're the active cause of your reality, you're going to be able to have a lot more control in your life. Ultimately, what happens as you go through negative experiences with intense negative emotion, that gets stored in your nervous system, And then what happens? In that moment, your brain creates a subconscious association. And it creates an association with whatever happened and the emotion that you felt. So then what happens in reality today, in the present moment, when you experience something that's similar to that experience you had before, your subconscious mind will associate what's happening in the present moment with that negative emotional experience, and you will unconsciously, and your physiology will change unconsciously, and that's why your state will change without you being able to catch it, right? But that will create thoughts in your mind that are the first thoughts that pop in. If we have self-agency, we're able to catch that, understand it, be aware of it, know what the cause is of it, and then actively choose what we then give as a meaning to it. That will change how we feel. It will then influence the way that we make decisions, and then the actions we take and the outcomes that we get. Ultimately, hypnosis can remove emotional resonance. But I want to make this clear because hypnosis isn't done for you. This is why hypnosis isn't done for you, and this is why we need to have self-agency, right? Well, the experience that you had, you were very likely in, well, we're always in an environment, right? In that environment, there's certain triggers. So the experience that you had, okay, might have created a negative emotion, and your way of dealing with that negative emotion could be smoking, for example, right? And imagine you develop the habit of smoking to deal with stress. Every single time you get stressed, there's a pathway that you've created that means that you choose, to then smoke a cigarette, and you smoke when you get stressed. Well, ultimately, after a long period of time, you will create this unconscious reaction to when things get stressful, you smoke. And for other people, it could be eating food. It could be like eating bad food, like sugar. It could be drinking alcohol. It could be taking cocaine. There could be a lot of things that you will do that this will happen, right? Well, ultimately, we can go in with hypnosis and we can remove that negative emotional charge. We can remove that, essentially change the pathway, change the pattern and the program that was installed in your subconscious mind. We can change how you were shaped, which is really cool, right? But if you have a habit like smoking and this deep ingrained identity level pathway, ultimately we need to have self-agency because this could happen, right? You could be in your environment, okay, and the thing that you experienced, you could have the same exact environment, okay? And this would maybe look, for a smoker, this would maybe look like this. Okay, for a smoker, there would be cigarettes lying everywhere, right? And after a little while, if that person didn't have self-agency or they're around people that smoked, for example, right? Apply the kind of context in whatever way makes sense in your head. But ultimately, you would have an environment that almost would trigger the old pathway, or used to trigger the old pathway, right? Those same triggers were in your environment over a long period of time, you might unconsciously start smoking again. Because you're constantly, in a way, you're constantly in a position where that old pathway has been triggered. And if you are in a position where you don't have self-agency, eventually you're going to start smoking again. Eventually you will. But if you had self-agency, imagine these cigarettes were in your environment. Well, what would you do with self-agency? Well, with self-agency, you would choose what label you give it, right? Or the meaning that you give those cigarettes. You would consciously choose to give the label of those cigarettes as something you would never do before, that you never do again, right? But someone that didn't have self-agency, we could do hypnosis. But if you aren't aware and aren't consciously aware of the thoughts that are in your own head, you're not going to be able to catch the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And then eventually, you're never going to actually stop yourself from talking yourself into doing it. Because ultimately, we can't control the first thought, but we can always control the second. But what about the 50th thought that you've had over the space of the week? And then your self-talk starts to say, oh, just go and do it, just go and do it. And you've not got the self-agency to be aware enough. That's a problem. But with self-agency, we get to give this label to whatever's in front of us. Does that make sense? Put a Y in the chat box. This whole process here, when you label something, you feel it, you make a decision, you behave, right? This is you creating a pathway. And every single time you label something, you react emotionally, make a decision and behave, you're creating a stronger pathway. Think about it if you were to walk through woods. Imagine you're on one side of the woods and there's a park on the other side that you want to get to. Well, the first time you walk to that park, there's going to be a little faint path on the ground. But imagine you walk to the park over the same leaves, over the same branches, through the same gap. Imagine you do it 1,000 times. Well, there's going to be a very deep path in the woods between you and the park. You're going to create a very deep, ingrained path. This is what happens when you do this all the time. You create very deep, ingrained pathways that for most people are so deep and so unconscious that they're just controlled by them. But the cool thing is, if you are in a position where you've lived your whole life and you've never had real control because you've never had real self-agency, a call like this is what can wake you up. You can actually just have a realization, fucking hell, perspective change, I actually do have conscious control of my life. That perspective change, it can genuinely be the thing that just changes your whole life and ability to control the things that you move forward and the things that you do. And again, most people, they don't live with self-agency. A lot of people live with life happening to them. Put a Y in the chat box if you can reflect back and think about a time where you acted like a victim or life happened to you, or you just didn't really in that moment have self-agency. I want you to think back to a version of yourself. So I want you to notice, as you put a Y in the chat box and you think back to that version of yourself, I want you to notice the difference between that version of you and you right now. And I don't mean you today, I mean you right now in this moment watching this call. Even from the version of you that started this call, I guarantee if you sit as a version of you and you look back to that version of you that was being a victim, that didn't have self-agency, life was happening to them, I guarantee you're going to notice quite a big difference in how you currently see the world. Even if it's from the start of this call, you've genuinely taken on a new paradigm just by listening to what I'm saying. You're opening yourself up to seeing things differently, which is so fucking powerful, because the awareness that you're getting on a call like this is giving you the control, okay? And that control is what? Self-agency. And I want you to genuinely practice this all the time. Notice the thoughts that are coming in. Notice the label that you're giving things. And in that moment, question it. Because the part of you that can question it is the part of you that can choose what label to give things. So what I'm going to do as well, right? I want to reinforce this last thing before you go. Because ultimately, this is something that you need to build as self-agency. It's not something that you just get given right now. You get given the perspective, but it's your job to maintain this, right? You need to maintain this awareness. You need to maintain self-agency and build it up in your life and create more control and be better at doing this, right? It's almost like a muscle that you build. You don't go to the gym for the first time and you've got the strongest bicep or chest. You need to go to the gym for a while and get stronger and better and stronger and better. That's what happens when it comes to building self-agency. You're going to get a lot better at this the more that you do it. But when you don't do it, this is what you can't do. If, for example, you've had this really strong pathway of reacting, life happens to you, and that's something that you've had your whole life, then ultimately it's not going to stop right now in this moment unless a very strong emotional charge that matches that pathway, some kind of traumatic event or really strong emotion, really overrides that current pathway, right? That could be a way that you could change very, very quickly. But ultimately, what's required moving forward for you guys is when you don't do the right thing, the next time you fuck up, which everyone does it. Okay, even the top of the world, everyone fucks up. Everyone thinks about the wrong things. Everyone feeds a negative thought. Everyone, again, feels shit sometimes. And you're almost doing it to yourself, right? It's like sometimes you will fall into a state of being unconscious. But if you then catch yourself, what you need to have is self-forgiveness. Because if you don't have self-forgiveness, what you're doing is you're holding on to shame. Okay? And when you hold on to shame, you're holding on to one of the lowest, one of the heaviest, one of the most horrible frequencies, vibrations, feelings that humans can experience. When you're holding on to shame, it's going to be such a heavy, strong emotion. And if that shame is tied to you falling out of alignment, if that shame is tied to you not having self-agency, well then how much stronger are you making the pathways that have been there from you not having self-agency? You're charging those pathways and reinforcing it like, oh my God, this is so bad. I can't believe that I fell off and I didn't do that. By charging that negative experience, by charging the fact that you fell off with such a negative, low vibration of shame, you're making you falling off a stronger pathway. You're all really good people, like such good fucking people, right? So if you do something wrong, you fall off, you're not productive, you waste time, whatever happens, forgive yourself straight away. As long as you know you're a good person, you can forgive yourself in that moment, instantly. You do not need to hold on to shame. So moving forward, have this in your mind, take on the perspectives that we've had today, and just recognize the fact that you genuinely have the choice to consciously and be the active cause of your reality. By law, this is how it works. It's just most people don't realize it. Most people don't get given this level of awareness. Most people go their whole life and they've never really heard of what I've just spoke about. But you guys have. And now you have this awareness to take more control and move forward in your life. And like John said in the chat, have ultimate control of your reality. Because if you don't have control, who does? If you're not the person that actually controls this, if you're not the cause, if you're the effect, how can you change the effect by being the effect? It doesn't make sense. And if you don't have the control, then who does? External, other people, circumstances, that's fucked. And that's not the reality you need to live. So I appreciate every single one of you's time. I'll speak to you all and speak to you all the guys that are doing the week of hypnosis. I'll see you guys in the morning. Very exciting. I actually love starting my day with that. Appreciate you all, and I'll speak to you all when I speak to you all.